Welcome, and happy Tuesday, August 23rd. Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. I'm your host, Q, coming to you yet again from my mother's basement, and I am joined by my co-host, P. What's going on there, P?
Oh, the usual. I got my button-up shirt on. I'm gonna take it a button down just to spice things up so you can see my chest. I'm ready to rock. Let's get into it.
Are those fuzzies, or do you actually have chest hair? Like, it
I
just
don't know
looks
what
like a little bit of
I don't know what a
lint.
fuzzy is, but unfortunately, for those that don't know, I am half black, half white, and the black side of my family is hairless and looks great, like seals. Super attractive. The white side of my family is short and also very hairy. So I got like the worst of all worlds. I've got this little hairy, but not hairy enough. What I'm trying to say.
Mm-mm. Drink some whiskey. I'll put some hair on your chest. We got a shorter episode for you guys today. We're going to be hopping over to Twitter Spaces in, I believe, an hour. Is that correct, Chris? We kick it off in an
Yes.
hour
Yep.
with Darius Dale and Dylan LeClaire. We're going to go over Team 42, Darius's team's macro update after Q2. And Dylan and Darius are going to just rap about what they think is going to go on from here until the end of the year. And Dylan's going to hate that whole conversation because I'm going to force him to have it. Whoops. So yeah, be sure to join us over on Twitter Spaces in an hour. And until then, we're going to hang out with you guys and talk some news and notes. So let's dive into it. First things first. Coinbase does not list securities. End of story. There's a lot of stuff going on with Coinbase right now. So there's an article that just came out by Paul Grewal, their chief legal officer, essentially trying to continue to hammer this point that Coinbase doesn't list securities. You do. You really do, my guy. But what I find funnier, Coinbase is facing a class action lawsuit for crashing during market volatilities and listing securities. So somebody is lying. Who? Is it the users or is it the chief legal counsel? Look, I don't know. I wish I could be the judge in this case because let me tell you, Alex McShane lookalike Brian Armstrong would probably be doing some time if I was the judge. But seeing as I'm not and I'm just some talking head on the internet, all I can say is let's grab some popcorn and watch and laugh about the idiots that still use Coinbase. And if you are one of those people who still use Coinbase, you are not an idiot. You are fooled and duped, and I'm sorry. There are other resources and other platforms that you should be using to buy your Bitcoin. And for the love of God, people, enough with the shitcoin casinos. Like if you want to gamble to make money, fine, do it. But don't treat it like it's anything more than just a bullshit security that's unlicensed and unregistered.
Yeah, I would say if people are using Coinbase, doesn't make you an idiot, but you are responsible for educating yourself, taking the information that's given to you. If you're listening to this stream, you have all the tools at your disposal to wrest control of your financial future away from the terrible people that are trying to control it.
I mean, you guys just sat down with a great interview with the privacy maestro himself, Matt Odell. So I think Odell even would say, don't even use any platform, go peer-to-peer, find a Bitcoin miner, find a friend, buy some Bitcoin from them, do it non-KYC. But there is obviously trade-offs and risks to that as well. It's comes at a premium. It's more difficult to procure. Don't buy Bitcoin from feds. That's how they get you. Yeah, no, that's pretty much it.
And to be clear, any entity that requires KYC is a Fed. It's the Fed reaching their puppet hand up through the anus and making their mouth talk. That's literally the image you should crystallize in your mind. Not weird at all.
I should have told you I was going to do this earlier, but I'm going to just move the final Coinbase story up really quickly just so that we can stop talking about Coinbase once and for all. Once again, Alex McShane lookalike Brian Armstrong was down with on Squawk Box yesterday, talking about laying off 18% of the workforce and why that was the right move. Doesn't rule out laying off further staff, almost as though that number is going to get larger. Hopes that layoffs are a one-time thing. I mean, look, Brian Armstrong is so full of shit that he makes people with diarrhea look like they're healthy and have perfect bowel movements. That's how full of shit Brian Armstrong is. He talks about IPOing a year and a half ago and seeing the stock price crater, not crash, but truly crater in the same way that all of the fucking unregistered securities that Coinbase puts onto their platform crater once they get listed. Almost like the insiders who own shares of Coinbase knew what was going to happen and wanted to dump their shares. I don't know. That's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's generally how it works. The largest bag holders on these tokens, were able to get in at just fractions of what everybody else is paying by the time it's listed on Coinbase. So it just creates exit liquidity for those entities, especially now that we're in this sort of crab walk market or the bear market, whatever you want to call it. It's a tale as old as time. Let's keep going. Unless you have any thoughts, Chris.
No, I think that's pretty much right. I mean, as you can see, someone brought up a great, not graphic, but the way that the market works of, these VCs or billionaires or whoever is getting in, giving money, it kind of gives them a platform of, give them tokens for free. They're going to talk about it with their large platform of people. They're going to pump up the price, dump it on retail. And then all of a sudden the threat of SEC comes along, or basically they got out of their position. They never talk about that ever again. And it's the same thing. I mean, as Q has mentioned countless times on this show, the stock market's literally just like legalized gambling. They consider it like financialized, safe, secure, legalized gambling. But that's kind of what it is at the end of the day. Yeah, historically, if you're just dollar cost averaging into a large index fund or whatever, over the long term, you've done all right because you're not get caught up in the ups and downs. But basically, that's what it is in the long term.
Yep.
Let's go to our second favorite exchange in the Bitcoin community.
Mt. Gox. If you do not know what Mt. Gox is, it's worth looking up, doing some internet research. Essentially, it was one of the first very large exchanges. And they had a huge hack, and everybody that had their shit on Mt. Gox got totally screwed. Now, they have been about to pay back their creditors for a very, very long time. And there is yet another story that's come out this time in the Wall Street Journal about this is about to happen. And we have been getting apparently closer and closer to the time which people that had their funds on Mt. Gox will be made whole. However, the article that we're referencing here is in Wall Street Journal and is once again some FUD bullshit. They are claiming that Mt. Gox creditors near payouts, sparking fears of a Bitcoin price crash. My God. And so they say 8 years after one of the largest cryptocurrency heists ever, investors stand on the precipice, the very precipice of getting back some of their tokens. With it comes fears of a Bitcoin crash. They go on to talk about how Mt. Gox lost 850,000 Bitcoin, although funnily enough, they say Bitcoins with an S, which just belies the fact that they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. It's never Bitcoins with an S. It's only Bitcoin, plural or singular. Anyway, I think that this argument is fallacious. I do not think that we are going to see any type of Bitcoin price decrease when these funds get released, because at the end of the day, the vast majority of these people would have already sold their funds and kicked themselves in the crotch for doing so back in the day. So I think that people who get these funds back are going to be praising the skies above that these funds were held from them and now they have access to them and hodling them into the future. That is my own personal take. It's not based on any science, but I'm curious what Chris, Q, what do you guys think?
You got anything to add, Q, or do you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
No, I think I know that they were already paid out, or at least they were given some cash equivalent. Obviously, they were not made completely whole for the price, but I know during the bankruptcy proceedings of Mt. Gox, some people were given a payoff, and that was considered being made whole. Technically, I don't think. I think it's being custodied by the Department of Justice. That technically all these Bitcoin from Mt. Gox. So in theory, the United States government could just hold on to them, and people say that's like it could be their war chest. So I find it very funny when it's like, oh, they're going to pay off these people, but I'm not sure if it's going to happen. And, they keep saying, oh, it's going to happen any day now. When did Mt. Gox go down? Tail end of 2013 or beginning of 2014 or something like that. I believe it was like 8 years ago at this point. But yeah, so they keep saying, it remains to be seen if it's true or not. I think Pete brought up a great point as we were talking about this story earlier. These people, if they do get the Bitcoin, consider themselves very lucky, or they should consider themselves very lucky if they have the ability to transact it and move it. Because I think 99% of these people would have sold at some point or lost them in this time period. That basically they had the luxury of someone else custodying their Bitcoin and they were to get them back. We do not advocate for this, but if they do actually get them back, they consider themselves lucky that they were basically forced to hold for 8 years. So remains to be seen, but we'll see. Q, you got anything else to add or next story?
Nah, let's talk mooch.
All right. Q's friend of the show, Anthony Scaramucci, says that Bitcoin is not mature enough to be used as an inflation hedge. I do not see eye to eye with Scaramucci on a lot of things. Q clearly does not see eye to eye on him on a lot of things. That's why he called him the contrarian Q. But I do agree with this. I don't think Bitcoin is an inflation hedge. It's a debasement hedge. So what that means is Jerome Powell and his money printer can keep printing as much money as you want. And by holding Bitcoin, you're preventing debasement of your currency, or at least if you're using that as your currency. What that basically means is they can print infinity amount of dollars, and Bitcoin, there's only ever going to be 21 million. So while prices are going up now, and if you were fortunate enough to buy it back then, I mean 2020 when things crashed, you've seen the price appreciate relative to then. But it does not protect against inflation. It protects against debasement of currency going forward. Anything else to add there, guys?
Nope.
Right.
Yes. I mean, I'm really proud of Mooch for finally understanding that the inflation narrative is dead in Bitcoin. I am stealing this from the likes of people far smarter than I. I did not come up with this, and I know it's being talked about a ton, but I think we're starting to see that narrative shift to, rather than Bitcoin being a hedge on inflation, it is a hedge on the monetary policy and the excessive money printing. I go back and forth on this a lot. We've had this conversation on this show. As much as we want to say inflation is only caused by money printing, that is one part of the equation. There is a supply side of the issue that I do think we are seeing some effects of. So to just flatly say that all of the money printing has caused all of the inflation, I think that's a naive approach, and that doesn't take a holistic outlook. That could be the majority, and I very much think the printing is the majority influence of inflation. But I think instead of us saying Bitcoin is a hedge against inflation, instead it's a hedge against the inevitable collapse of the US dollar and the fiat system, and it's a hedge against that I'll allow. So, and nor do I think it'll ever be a hedge against inflation, because by design, it is designed to be deflationary and create prices that are deflationary. So I don't know if you can consider that a hedge necessarily, but maybe it is, because it's literally deflation is the opposite of inflation.
All right.
Let's chat Tom Emmer.
Yeah, I have the next story. All right, so Tom Emmer has written a letter to Treasury Secretary Yellen, our favorite. What are the fucking creatures from Fellowship of the Ring called? The ring wraiths? Yeah, our favorite ring wraiths. The what?
No.
Ring wraiths.
He's talking...
The hideous monsters that have been infected by the rings and are like...
The nine men that went from good to bad and were corrupted by Sauron.
That's right.
I know way too much. The Nazgul.
That's the word, the fucking Nazgul. Anyway, she's a Nazgul. So Emmer wrote an official letter to head Nazgul. And bear with me here. I'm going to read some of the passages. It's going to be a little bit longer, but I think it's important. He basically wrote this letter saying that the sanctions executed against Tornado Cash are bullshit. He says, OFAC sanctions on the virtual currency anonymizing software Tornado Cash, in accordance with Executive Order 13694, are the first sanctions issued against something other than an individual or entity determined to be responsible for or complicit in malicious cyber-enabled activities that pose a threat on the United States national security, foreign policy, economic health, or financial stability. He goes on to provide some more details, and he clarifies that this doesn't make sense. He says they are a smart contract address whose operation is determined exclusively by open source software found on the Ethereum blockchain. In other words, the addresses do not appear to be a person, entity, or property. They are instead widely distributed technological tools, and they are not under the control of any entity or natural person. he goes into a lot more detail here, but essentially he's bringing up, this is a very, very well articulated and succinct letter that articulates the problems that are inherent in OFAC's actions here. It is essentially totally bullshit. And I applaud him for writing this letter. I'm super interested to see if it has any impact on how this proceeds. The truth is, the OFAC knows exactly what they're doing. They understand that this is probably going to go to court, that it's going to be likely found to be, I don't know what the right term is, but let's say unjust. That is not actually their intention here. Their intention is to create a chilling effect on these types of tools in general. And it doesn't matter whether or not this is legal or illegal in the eyes of the law. The fact that they have sanctioned these people so effectively, and it's really fucked up. The GitHub repos were immediately taken down. All of the repositories that these people had created were immediately taken down off GitHub, just wiped. And one of them was arrested in the Netherlands because of this. So it doesn't actually matter whether this is found ultimately to be good or bad or reasonable or unreasonable. The fact that they can just issue this blog post and suddenly all of these things happen signals very strongly to the rest of the industry that, like, hey, we're coming for you. And it's fucked up. It's really, really, it's not a good thing. And we need to fight against it. What do you guys think?
You know, I don't want to beat a dead horse with a drum, but we've had these conversations, and it warrants repeating. Whether or not you think Ethereum is a scam, whether or not you are as tried and true hardcore Bitcoin maxi, or you dabble and invest in everything, this attack against Ethereum and specifically Tornado Cash is an attack that will be replicated and used against us at some point in the future. I wholeheartedly am afraid and believe that. And to sit by and celebrate or laugh at or not concern ourselves with this, when at its core, if you want to really break this down, first principles, it's code. And code has been defended by free speech. And everything that we do in Bitcoin is rooted in code. And so if they can attack code that we don't necessarily agree with, but exists, what do you think they're going to do to our code that they don't agree with? So to be honest, I'm very much in the camp that every single Bitcoiner should be paying attention to this and raising noise against the actions of the US government in this instance. But that remains to be seen.
I think that was beautifully said, Q. I don't think I could say it better myself.
I'm going to shift now to mainstream news. Look, I have a rule when it comes to investing, and that rule that has made me a lot of money is do the exact opposite of what the mainstream news tells you to do, especially when it comes to investing in stocks. Why? 9 times out of 10, these big money investors aren't giving you and I a tip for us to make money. They're saying something so that they themselves can make a move like, oh, why don't you go buy this stock? Meanwhile, they own a 1% stake in that whole company, and they're going to dilute their share down to a 0.5% stake. So they need to increase the liquidity. They need buyers like you and I who watch some random show or read some article and they're like, oh, buy this stock because this big investor said you should be buying it, without thinking what's really happening. So I explained this output because we are now, shout out Jim Cramer. Literally Jim Cramer is exit liquidity for every single big VC firm. However, we are now seeing from MSN that now might be one of the best times to buy Bitcoin. Fuck. Like, I know it is, but I don't need you to tell me. And because you're telling me now, like tinfoil hat, now I'm thinking, all right, so are you trying to create exit liquidity? And I'm going to...
The question is, how big are MSNBC's bags?
Well, it's a little bit of that. And I think it's a lot more about another thing going on. And like, no one has given me an answer that has convinced me that the correlation between equity markets and Bitcoin has ceased. In fact, I've only seen further confirmation of the two, which leads me to confirm yet again my thesis that What is moving the price of Bitcoin is big money investors like hedge funds and VCs and pensions that don't publicly disclose what they're buying and selling are moving Bitcoin's price the same way they move the price of tech stocks and other stocks and equities all throughout the public markets. And this really reads to me like they are trying to have more liquidity come into the market. But if I, which I do, still pay very close attention to market directions and what direction I'm expecting things to go, not to make this about equity markets, but we are in a very precarious position right now with the NASDAQ. And we were turned away at the, what was it, like the 1300 level, the 13,000 level. We broke above that for a second. Then we've been slowly and steadily crashing down below. And now we're hanging at this like 12,300, 12,500 level. We are literally in no man's land. And a break in either direction will dictate where the market goes, quite possibly for the next few months. And if we have a break on the downside, my expectations will be that Bitcoin's price will fall, just because I don't see any reason why this correlation is ended. Mind you, these are the way that I interpret the market. These are the clues that I'm seeing. Do your own due diligence. None of this should be financial advice. You should not be trading off of what some kid who lives in his parents' basement is telling you to do. Please, please, please assess what risk tolerance you have with your own portfolio and make your own best judgment, and you do your own due diligence. The way I see it, I see a lot more downside in the equity markets. And if I see that, I am hard pressed to find any rational reason as to why the price of Bitcoin would not follow the equity markets. P's head is going to explode because I talked so much about price for so long.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I'm zen.
Alrighty. I don't want to report on this story, but
I got you.
You're right. I hope this comes true tomorrow.
All right, so Q might get his wish. I'm doubtful, but we will see. All right, he's celebrating preemptively. Like I said, Biden plans on Wednesday to do a student loan debt relief announcement. No one knows what that means. Some people are expecting 10K of relief in their federal loans, but it remains to be seen. I think this ties in really well with the story we talked about a week ago. Q, remember you reported on Tesla and there was a tax or a tax credit for like 6,500 or $7,000. And then 6,500 tax credit that the government was going to give. At that exact moment that it was announced by the government, or a week prior, Tesla raised the price of their vehicles by about 7K, as well as Ford with their electric vehicle and GM as well. So, with this tax credit, things just get more expensive. I don't expect anything different for school, for colleges. I think with this, in subsequent years, now people are expecting always $10,000 of relief. So let's just tack on another $10,000 of cost to the cost of colleges on top of whatever the high inflation rate is now. So let's just say another 10% on top of the 10K more that they're going to add to the sticker price already. I don't think this makes colleges cheaper. I just think it incentivizes people to go into more debt, because more of it's going to get relieved at the expense of taxpayer dollars. What does that all mean? It means they're going to print a hell of a lot more money. They're going to debase your currency. If you're holding it in fiat dollars, it's guaranteed to have less purchasing power in the future. This is why we Bitcoin, not financial advice.
I want to caveat one thing that you said, because I only learned about this last week, talking to a friend's younger brother who is getting ready for his junior year, of high school, and starting to look at colleges. And I asked him what the sticker price on some of these schools are. And dude, do you know colleges are costing now almost 75 to 80K a year?
That's absurd. I did not know that.
Like
I knew like back when. Oh, go ahead.
Like I'll date myself. Like when we went to school, the most expensive college you can go to is like in the 60s for a whole year, and that included room and board. Mind you, 75, 80K does include room and board right now. And then when you went to school, it was what, like $1,000 a year?
No, it was like a handful of seashells, man.
Like,
they were shiny ones though. They were super shiny.
Chris, you're absolutely right. The underlying issue has not been solved. It has not. We have not dealt with the rising cost of college education for a, quite frankly, smaller payout on the other end. And that's a whole other can of worms that I'm not going to get into, because if I say too many things. Brian Armstrong lookalike Alex McShane will appear on the stream. But I do, like, I'm biased. I have an incentive to have this go through. Yes. Unfortunately, we already see that price tag increase. That's already happened. And like, I think this whole system has to collapse and get redone. But everyone wants to know what P is thinking because P is holding his tongue.
About colleges?
Yes.
Oh, I mean, it's all fucking bullshit. I also think that the wiping clean of the slate of college debt is totally bullshit as well. Now, one thing that I find, I've talked about this before, people that have a lot of college debt, their like entire psychology is warped by that fact. Like, I know so many people who are like, well, when pressed, it's kind of like, well, I identify with more liberal ideas because this Damocles sword that's hanging over the back of my fucking neck will probably only be wiped clean by a more liberal agenda. So I say that because I actually went to a much less expensive college because I was like, I do not want to have debt. Now, it turns out in retrospect, that was probably a terrible idea because now we're going to get this wiped clean. But it's frustrating to be in a situation where people that weren't thinking of this from a perspective of like, I don't want to have debt because that's bad, are ultimately getting fucked, right? There is no such thing as just like, oh, the people who have debt are free now, and that's great. You have to take into account that you are damaging people who didn't take on debt. I think that's interesting. Also,
unpack that.
Yeah.
Unpack how are you damaged because you didn't take out debt?
Yeah, I mean, in my particular case, I did not go to. I got accepted to several Ivy League colleges that would have cost me a significant amount, and I would have had to take on a massive amount of debt in order to go to. And I thought to myself, like, you know what? Like, I think I'm going to get as good of an education, or I can create as good of an education within a state level school. Now, I grew up in a state that has very good schools. That's the UC system. But that was a huge part of my decision there. So if I had gone to these Ivy League colleges, I would have, I don't think I actually would have gotten a better education, but I would have that stamp on my resume. And though it doesn't matter as much or at all in the Bitcoin world, that I had to fight a lot harder than many of my peers in the software engineering space because I had a degree from not an Ivy League school. And it's fucked up. Now, I don't resent people who made the decision correctly, but that's kind of where my bias comes from. This is all a long-winded way of saying I have a bias, Q, you have a bias, we all have biases.
Totally.
But the
But
other
like,
thing I would say,
full disclosure, literally the same exact decision. Like, I had the same exact decision. And for me, it was the one school I chose gave me the largest scholarship. It was, of all the schools I applied to, it was literally not on the list of what schools I wanted to attend. Like, that was how much I did not want to go to the school I ultimately went to. And I got into Ivy League schools that I had to turn down. So my question is, rather than framing this like I'm not trying to frame this as I'm a victim. I made choices. I assessed what I could afford based on the college degree I was getting and the amount of debt I was getting and the amount of expected salary I was to get. Like, I made that calculation myself and still got royally fucked over along the way. Do I think I'm entitled to this? Absolutely not. Do I think that American Airlines was entitled to their bailout 2 summers ago? I do not. And if we continue to give these corporate bailouts, like ever since 2008, all we've done is give corporate bailout after corporate bailout after corporate bailout. I personally am just sick of those. And I would rather see a bailout. All of those bailouts have been wiped out and focused on the citizens instead. Candidly, that is my logic here.
Yeah. Also, I will be clear. I can like rail and resent and be like, fuck you for making the right, what may turn out to be the right call. But like, that's just, luck of the draw, good analysis on your part, if that was part of your decision. But the other thing I wanted to comment on is just, you said something. When I went to, I didn't actually, of course, pay for college with a handful of shiny seashells. That was part of the deal. I remember my compatriots, people who went through the same programs that I do, when they were getting ready to go to med school, it was like, oh shit, dog, like you're going to have $250,000 in debt after 4 to 6 years of med school. Like that's fucked, man. That's a lot of money. And the idea that like the average person is now looking at like, you know, $300,000 to $500,000 makes total sense given the amount of inflation.
For undergrad.
Yeah, for fucking undergrad. Like, Jesus Christ. We need to look up what medical school costs these days, because that will be telling for me at least. Anyway, the point is, it's fucking crazy that education costs that much. And once again, we see the government and the Biden administration trying to take the actions that will gain them the most public support from their base, rather than actions that actually will attempt to solve the problem.
Q's face lit up. Something came in.
Just tuition at Harvard Medical School is $67,000 a year.
Holy
Just
shit.
tuition.
Wait. So how much is it all in?
It's over 70.
Well, I'd say well over 70.
And how many years does the average person go to Harvard?
Medical school is 4 years. Okay.
You're going to be like $1 million in debt. No, 3 million by the time you get through it.
It estimates with living expenses, cost of attendance is over $100K a year.
Okay, so that's like $80K a year times 4. That's $320,000, and then we're adding in $100K a year times 4. We're looking at like, holy shit, man, that's a lot of fucking money. We're looking at, like, as I said, $750,000 to go through medical school.
$720,000, right?
Yeah.
So
good luck.
Speaking of being actually bankrupt, morally bankrupt, ethically bankrupt, all these things, Celsius files lawsuit claiming that Prime Trust has failed to return 17 million of crypto. So with that said, Celsius, we've talked about many times before, is going through bankruptcy proceedings. If Prime Trust owes them money, they should pay them, obviously. But why this is important: Prime Trust is one of the main custodial trusts behind many of the popular exchanges, whether it's Strike, Swan Bitcoin, OKCoin, a list of a whole bunch of different exchanges. And what that means that if Prime Trust were to go bankrupt, this could cause disruptions to people trying to buy Bitcoin. Obviously, this is these are through KYC platforms, but it could disrupt a large market of the way that people buy Bitcoin. I think the only one that really doesn't use this is Cash App, because Square runs their own servers. But this could be very, very big for the industry. Obviously, if Prime Trust, I don't want to say goes bankrupt, but if this cascading effect of liquidations is still to come. So yeah,
I can't wait until 3AC has to liquidate their GBTC. I'm going to go off script for a second, and if the Hexicans come for me, they come for me. But Richard Hart yesterday, I saw some video that he was like trying to explain why GBTC is undervalued right now and why it's like an arbitrage trade, and continuously ignores that 3AC has yet to liquidate their very significant portion of GBT shares, which a judge has ordered them to do so. And what happens when, I believe it's like 30%, right?
Yeah, last time I checked, it was like 29, 30%.
It's
negative.
It's a nuts amount. Like that is, if 30% of the market supply is introduced as a forced seller, you could literally see the price crash a minimum of 60% if there are no bids.
Let me caveat this. They own, I think it was 5 to 6% of all of GBTC stock, but the obviously GBTC is at negative 30% to NAV, net asset value. So the stock is trading 30% lower than what Bitcoin's price, relative to Bitcoin's price.
Okay, so Three Arrows only owns 5% of all the shares. Okay, that seems more realistic.
Yep, yeah.
That could still cause a cratering of the price, another 10% minimum if there are no bids when they are forced liquidating.
Yep, yeah, exactly. The price would probably go even further down, definitely.
Yeah. This is going to be fun, guys. Everyone says the contagion is over, but let me be the first to tell you, no, it is not. Let's do our final story of the day, P. End it with a good note, please.
I got you, fam. Intel, you may have heard of them, signs a $30 billion funding partnership with Brookfield to finance chip factory expansion. What does this mean? As we've talked about many times on this show, we have a significant issue in that the vast majority of 5 and 7 nanometer microchips, which are used in basically everything that we use that has a computer in it, are currently manufactured outside of the United States. The vast majority of the world's microchips are manufactured in Taiwan. Now, that is an issue because it creates an existential threat to everywhere else in the world, especially when China is posturing as though they are going to invade Taiwan. The US recently publicly said that we support China's, one China policy, which is essentially us saying like, Taiwan does not exist. They're part of China, and Taiwan is an insurgent group that is operating outside of what should be Chinese control. So the world is trying to figure out, how do we mitigate this risk? Because if China controls those manufacturing plants, those chip foundries, then they can fuck over everyone. So Intel is working with the publicly traded Canadian asset management firm to help fund the development of these chip foundries, which take about a decade all said and done, and start manufacturing them back in the United States. This is hugely positive, and I wish that more organizations were going down this route much more rapidly, because we have got to decentralize the manufacture of these microchips.
Yeah, I'll caveat this as well. I mean, P, you brought up a great point that it takes near a decade to do this, and that doesn't even include the engineers and operators required to operate them. It requires highly technical people. I know China, normally they're putting in millions, quite literally millions of people are going into the engineering field, and they obviously pick and choose the cream of the crop to run these chip manufacturers. But this is just a realistic take. The U.S. does not have enough highly specialized engineers to do this. And it's going to take a lot of I don't know what to say, it's a decade plus of learning lessons. So after it's built, it's going to take another 5 years for us to perfect the craft and really start competing in a global sense, I believe. Who knows? Maybe we'll steal in a bunch of engineers from Taiwan and China to help us with that. But that's my 2 cents.
If you want to follow someone who is, go ahead. I was gonna say, if you want to follow someone who is deep in the semiconductor manufacturing space and is a fucking genius, follow Rajwinder on Twitter. We'll put his handle somewhere in here. But he's one of the founders of Plebnet and is just super generous with his time. And the one time I watched a conversation with him and another semiconductor manufacturing expert, it was like staring into the sun. I was just like, I understand 1 out of every 50 words you're saying, but they sound super fucking smart. And then the other person was like, oh, you are also super fucking smart. And I was like, I knew it. Anyway, that's Rajwinder on Twitter. I'll find his actual handle. He's a good dude and a lightning expert. The end. That's all I got.
Smash that subscribe button down below, gang. Thank you for joining us. We're going to call the stream here. Come join us over on Twitter Spaces in about 20 minutes. We're going to be joined by Darius Dale and Dylan LeClaire, and we're going to talk all things macro. And of course, if you have not yet already, please lock in your ticket to Bitcoin Amsterdam using promo code BMLive to get 10% off. It's how we keep our jobs. It's what keeps the lights on. So please, 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 if you are in Europe, you want to have some fun, you want to go to the biggest Bitcoin event in all of Europe land, come join us in Amsterdam. That's a wrap.